Namaste. What's the difference between a rolling marble and a walking ant? How about between a ball being thrown up and the release of a bird? Well, without the influence of an outside force, the marble and ball are inert. They won't move. An ant and a bird, however, have the potential to move even without the agency of an external influence. When a marble rolls downhill, it usually stops when encountered by an obstacle, yet an ant usually goes around the obstacle. A ball tossed up usually comes down, and when thrown, the place where it will land can be precisely predicted by physics and mathematics. Yet, a bird may not always come back to the hand that released it, and its movements or destination cannot be exactly predicted. Soberly inquiring into the reasons underlying such phenomena, and systematically arriving at rational conclusions that help us better comprehend the reality in which we live, are paramount for an honest and comprehensive account of true reality. Such topics are of interest to individuals who desire to know and live in accordance with the truth, considering the deep insights of ancient wisdom and their modern development will prove helpful in this effort. Things that solely rely on external causes to become active are inanimate objects, while things that can become active through internal causes are animate objects. This is one of the essential distinctions differentiating non-life or matter from life. In this regard, Aristotle laid the foundation for a comprehensive science of nature. In addition to the four causes that must be considered for a complete account of nature, Aristotle distinguished between the Greek terms dunamis, energia, and entelechy, or potentiality, actuality, and actualization, respectively. It is important to note that the word entelechy includes telos within it, meaning end or purpose. To initially become familiar with these ideas, we may tend to think in modern scientific terms of potential energy, kinetic energy, and the impetus that triggers the potential to actualize. But properly considering the significance of these concepts in relation to animate living objects and inanimate material objects, it's necessary to learn G.W.F. Hegel's differentiation between inner and outer teleology, as well as the distinction between mechanical, chemical, and teleological systems. In Idols of the Mind versus True Reality, Dr. Bhaktimadhava Puri explains the following. Objects that lack internal relatedness may possess merely external relatedness. Mechanics views a system as having separable independent parts that possess a fixed identity outside their connection within the system of which they are parts. If the isolated parts of a system retain the same identity as when connected within it, it is called a mechanical system. Examples of mechanical systems include the solar system or a clock. Dr. Puri goes on to say, chemical objects have parts that are internally related. They are not the same when isolated from each other as when they are connected or united with each other. External relations are formed due to the intrinsic properties of the individual parts of a chemical reaction. An example is the relationship between sodium hydroxide, hydrochloric acid, and their neutral product, sodium chloride, or table salt. Here, the individual character of a chemical object, such as being basic or acidic, is relative to the characteristic of what it is being compared to. The individual character of a mechanical object is generally not relative to external things. A gear is still the same gear whether it's in the clock or not. The relationship of mechanical objects to other objects within a mechanical system is created by external law, whereas the relationship of chemical objects to other objects within a chemical system is due to the inherent nature of each individual chemical object and the natural interaction of such objects based on these properties. So, the parts of a clock retain the same identity whether or not they are united as a clock, but the identity of chemical objects changes based upon what they are in contact with. When the neutral sodium atom encounters the negatively charged chlorine atom, they become neutral table salt. As will be seen, the so-called parts of a teleological or biological system have no substantial identity outside of their relation to the whole, of which they are part. Now, let's return to Aristotle's natural philosophy and recall dunamis or potentiality, energia or actuality, and entelechy or actualization. The potential of matter is to become one, i.e., to join with other units of matter. In its potentiality, a clock exists as a formal cause or blueprint, an idea inspired by some lacking or need, which is the final cause or purpose that the clock is meant to serve. The actual clock is the product of an efficient cause, the clockmaker, working on some material cause, such as wood and metal, to form them in accordance with the blueprint. When we understand entelechy or actualization to be the work of some agency or efficient cause, the impetus that compels the potential to actualize, then we must acknowledge that mechanical systems composed of inanimate material objects completely rely on external agency to form. On the other hand, the potential of life is to become a mature form. The potential for an organism exists within the seed, which develops into the organism that then contains more seeds. A goal-directed process is observed throughout embryological development, where external attempts to interfere with or modify this process have been shown to be ineffective. Thus, it is reasonable to conclude that there is an internal agency directing the development of an animate living object towards its mature form. Immanuel Kant reached such a conclusion and called this internal agency Naturzweck in German, while Aristotle called it the soul or de anima in Greek. Hegel's systematic development of Begriff or the concept and its role in determining its content is extremely relevant for a scientific approach considering these matters. We may wonder, what does animate living objects? Isn't it chemical reactions? Well, chemical reactions generally produce stable products. However, these reactions are not self-perpetuating over the course of many years. Within living entities, there exist special kinds of chemical reactions that are sustained for great lengths of time. This is known as biological activity, which can become very intricate and thus defy explanation at a merely chemical level. Dr. B.M. Puri describes that those parts that cannot be separated from a system without destroying it as a working system can no longer be called parts, but are participants or members of a dynamic whole. The participants are as essential to the whole as the whole is to the participants. This is the biological system or organism. Here we are removed from the stasis of fixed objects and are in the milieu of a pure dynamical activity. Participants cannot be isolated from the whole in which they are participants and remain what they are. A DNA molecule can no more be what it is as a producer of protein molecules than the protein molecules can be what they are as produced from the action of DNA and producing the DNA. Each participant is the cause and effect of each other participant, as Kant defined organism. Therefore, nothing in an organism is without purpose, nor is the organism as a whole without purpose. In the environment, thus everything in the organism is both purpose or end, and means. The phenomena in biological systems, like the circular or dialectic relationship between DNA and protein, require conceptual thinking to be described honestly and comprehensively. Although such thinking goes against the central dogma of molecular biology, which is a theory stating that genetic information flows only in one direction, from DNA to RNA to protein, or RNA directly to protein. The dilemma which necessitates different thinking has been acknowledged by chemists like Robert Shapiro. He says, genes and enzymes are linked together in a living cell, two interlocked systems, each supporting the other. It is difficult to see how either could manage alone. Yet, if we are to avoid invoking either a creator or a very large improbability, we must accept that one occurred before the other in the origin of life. But which one was it? Dr. Leslie Ann Prey has described this phenomenon further, for those who would like to read more about the details. Encouraging us to adopt a more conceptual approach in our thinking, Dr. Bhaktimadhava Puri explains, abstract understanding tends to think of either a unity or a multiplicity. Pure multiplicity is indicative of the atomic thinking of material reductionism. Pure unity is the indeterminateness of abstract monism. Unity in multiplicity is the comprehensive thinking of dialectical reason. Life must be comprehended as a process in which its participants are simultaneously both ends or products, and means or production to one another. The role that thought plays in determining our observation of nature and experience of reality, including underlying conscious or unconscious presumptions, will be addressed further in our study of the second chapter of Idols of the Mind versus True Reality. Studying the distinctions between mechanical, chemical, and teleological systems correspond to the traditional disciplines of natural sciences, physics, chemistry, and biology, respectively. The fields of physics and mathematics are fit to deal with mechanical systems, and chemistry is equipped to understand chemical systems. However, neither is sufficient to properly comprehend the dynamic, organic nature of biological systems. We humbly recommend reading pages 101 through 107 of pioneering quantum physicist Werner Heisenberg's 1958 book, Physics and Philosophy, for a reasonable and insightful explanation which is still relevant today, briefly describing the historical relationship of classical Newtonian physics and the developing field of chemistry, and their eventual integration in quantum physics, and the rationale behind why considering this clarifies why contemporary physics and chemistry will not suffice for completely describing biological phenomena. The dynamic activity and dialectic relationships observed within living entities, from cells to organisms, throughout their developing and mature forms, is motivated by goal-directed internal agency that demonstrates resiliency against external interference. Contemporary embryonic stem cell research supports this. Soberly studying this organic activity requires interdisciplinary, cooperative, and holistic approaches throughout the subdisciplines of biology. Scientific work in cognitive biology at the cellular level is a current and widely developed field not known to many biologists and scientists in general, especially those invested in study of mechanistic concepts of natural science. Review articles on 21st century frontier science on cognitive cell biology are useful in this regard. One of the easiest and most instructive experiments anyone can do without much cost is to look under a microscope at single-celled creatures and watch the non-random, purposeful, intentional trajectory of organic cells versus the Brownian movement of dust particles. The difference between life and non-life is striking. Subdisciplines within biology observe the cognitive activity of living entities from different angles of vision. Molecular biology is concerned with genome editing and replicating behaviors, which imply intelligent manipulation, as well as chaperone molecules appearing just when they are needed in just the right place. Cellular biology observes the ingenuity of cellular feeding behaviors, cells healing themselves, and overcoming unexpected obstacles in novel ways. Organismic biology emphasizes the role of the organism as an irreducible organic whole, within which cells, molecules, and their activities are sublated. Plant pathologist Heinrich Anton de Bary acknowledged that it is not so much that the cells make the plant It is rather that the plant makes the cells. Organismic biologists argue against the emphasis of cells causing the organism on the basis that if cells are taken out of the organism, they will not necessarily form a new organism. Emphasis on the cell misses the role of the organism as a whole. Again, the significance that our own thinking holds in determining how we perceive nature and reality, including our underlying metaphysical, ontological, and epistemological presumptions, will be discussed in our study of the second chapter of Idols of the Mind versus True Reality by Dr. Bhakti Madhavapuri. We hope that you will join us. Satyameva Jayate, Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Jayate.